Welcome in, guys. This is the Gators' final report from a crazy Florida Gator game where Florida came out on top 70-52. It wasn't a game that a lot of people expected, especially the high-scoring game. Florida hasn't scored this many points since they played the Citadel. You have to go all the way back to 2008 when Florida had a couple of guys by the name of Tim Tebow and Percy Harvin, and Urban Meyer was the head coach. But definitely a wacky game. There was a lot of coaching changes that happened earlier in the week. Todd Grantham, the defensive coordinator, was he got let go Sunday along with John Hevesy, the O-line coach. As I wait for a couple of you guys to hop on in as we do this after every Gator game. This is the Gators Final Report. I'm your host, Dylan Denmark. And of course, there's a lot to talk about with coaching changes on the coordinator side. Should Dan Mullen be let go? That's always been circling around all week. And, you know, it didn't look pretty, but somehow Florida came out on top over Samford, the Bulldogs of all teams, 70-52. As we have a couple people still rolling in as it starts time at 4:30. I'll give it about 30 more seconds and then we'll get started. All right, one thing is clear for this Florida Gator team. Number one, I don't understand why, but Florida with Dan Mullen, his guy is Emory Jones. Don't understand why. Anthony Richardson was cleared to play throughout the week. Dan Mullen said that. If we didn't talk about it last Saturday, but he hurt his knee the day before the South Carolina game in a hotel dancing, and he got cleared from the concussion the day before, so he didn't practice during the week. Was cleared either the Thursday or Friday, and then he was dancing in a hotel. I can't make this up. Friday, was cleared to play from the concussion the Thursday, and then hurt his knee Friday. Couldn't play South Carolina. Then he got cleared to play during the week, and I guess Dan Mullen he doesn't want to roll with Anthony Richardson for whatever reason. I think a part of that is it's a part of ego. It's him being stubborn. I think it's Dan Mullen saying, this is my guy. He was loyal to me all these years. He didn't hop in the transfer portal like a lot of players you see in college football. Not saying that it's right or wrong. I don't agree with it. Anthony Richardson has to be your guy, especially the way the season's gone. You were 4-5 coming into today. You have 3 games left. You have to see what you have going for next year because this season's a lost year. This is a lost season. What happens between Samford, Missouri, and Florida State doesn't really matter. If you get to a bowl game, woohoo, congratulations. You get an extra 15 practices for a couple of weeks, and then you play in the toilet bowl right around Christmas time. So Anthony Richardson didn't play. Emory Jones, although, played pretty well. Emory Jones, exactly, went 28 for 34 with 460 yards, 6 touchdowns, no picks, and he led the team in rushing with 10 carries, 86 yards. He just outrushed Dameon Pierce, who had 78 yards. Florida offensively was good. They trailed by 2 touchdowns at one point. I think the score was 42-28. The defense was pitiful. I listened to most of the game on the radio. I saw the first drive on TV. Samford was going tempo. And again, Coach Robinson is probably Florida's best recruiter on the defensive side. He's a linebackers coach. He is the interim D coordinator. Samford goes tempo. Samford is about to run the play at the 2-yard line on the first drive. And there's a D lineman, I forget who it was, try to sub in. And one D lineman that was on the field about to be in a 3-point stance runs in between the center and guard to get subbed out. And then Dan Mullen calls timeout. He's pissed. He throws his hat off. Coach Robinson gets on the team. That's all practice and that's all coaching. That has nothing to do with the players. And I understand the players are your resume if you're a coach. I don't see how this entire defensive staff isn't let go at the end of the year. You see time and time again, this season. It's been consistently inconsistent. You show up against Kentucky, you show up well against Alabama after the second quarter. You get blown off the ball against LSU. The Georgia game was good, but it defensively, Florida's defense played good against Georgia. And then last week, Florida quit against South Carolina. Today, there was, on the second drive, a busted coverage. I know there was a lot of players that were out. Dan Mullen said in the post-game conference that 30 guys were out with the flu, and they all came back. They were out Tuesday, and they came back. So hopefully Florida's off of that front, and they're done with anything with illnesses. But we're talking about Samford, and I know people. The thing that always kills me with when a Division I team plays an FCS team is you always hear, well, the FCS team has, an SEC player. They had guys. I go D1. Everyone on Florida's roster is D1. Everyone on Florida's roster is an SEC player. Samford probably has a handful, maybe 5, and that's inexcusable. Samford finished with 28 first downs and 530 yards, 416 through the air with 114 on the ground. That's insane. And that's an SEC defense, a defense that went toe-to-toe with Alabama, an SEC defense that held Kentucky to 13 points defensively. They really played Georgia pretty well if you take out the 21 points that happened at the end of the first half. I mean, I don't see how you keep this defensive staff if you're the administration, you're Scott Strickland, if you're Dan Mullen. Dan Mullen being let go, I saw one question from Brian. Does Dan Mullen get fired? I don't know. I thought he was right after the South Carolina game. My emotions kind of changed throughout the week. If it were me, I would let go of Dan Mullen. You have to ask yourself this question. What are your expectations? Florida's expectations are to go contend for titles in the SEC. That means beating Georgia, competing with Georgia, and then competing with Alabama and Nick Saban. Does Dan Mullen look like that right now in year number 4? The answer is absolutely not. As sad as it is to say, it looks like from the first 3 years that Dan Mullen has used a lot of McElwain's players. And now it's year 4. A lot of those players have left, and you're left with the guys that you've recruited because, I mean, the only players that are left from McElwain's team are a few 5th, 6th year seniors. Malik Davis, who came in 2017 as a freshman. Guys like that. There's very few of them on the roster. So I don't see how you keep Dan Mullen if you're Scott Strickland and you're the AD. But I think I still think it's a pretty good chance. What's the word I want to use? I still think it's pretty 50-50 if he gets fired or not. Again, I wouldn't do that. I would just let him go along with the entire staff. But you can't have performances like this if you're the University of Florida. Giving up 52 points to an FCS school that by the way, you pay them to come, and it's supposed to be a cupcake game before you play Missouri and then before you play Florida State. I don't see any way that Florida, unless something miraculously happens, they beat Missouri and then you play at home to Florida State, and my goodness, I don't know what that'll be like. Just speaking from a gambling perspective, if you look at all the Florida games, Florida was a 35-point favorite today. Last week, Florida was a 20-plus point favorite. Lost both games. Florida went up to a 12-point favorite against LSU. Lost that game. Kentucky, I think Florida was an 8-point favorite, and they lost that game by 8. So there's just things. There's reasons why you can't do that if you're at the University of Florida. And one thing is the offensive line. John Hevesy left. He got relieved of his duties, whatever you want to call it. He got fired Sunday. John Hevesy, not an elite recruiter, couldn't bring anybody in. And I saw an article today from Zach Goodall. Pretty much the vast majority of this offensive line is McElwain's guys. Think about that. Jim McElwain left in 2017. Mullen's in his 4th year. And, you have Ethan White who came recently. but most of the guys that are on Florida's offensive line were either recruited from Jim McElwain, were verbally committed to Florida under Jim McElwain, or they were already on the roster, and that's inexcusable. It ask you can ask anybody, you can ask any coach. It doesn't matter how great of athletes you have on the outside or how great running backs you have. If you don't have time to throw, if you can't create holes, um, that's on the offensive line coach, and that all goes back to recruiting. Dan Mullen mentioned, I think it was Monday when he had his Monday presser like he usually does at 1:00. He mentioned why he let go of the two guys when Mullen previously said, "I'm not going to make any in coaching changes," and it was because the reason he said was the team looks worse than what it was beginning of the season. That's exactly right. Florida offensive line the first 4 games looked outstanding, running the ball at will, having 380 yards rushing on average in their first 4 games against South Florida, FAU, Alabama, and Kentucky. And then since then, it's been off and on. The Kentucky game was pitiful with 14 penalties. I think it was 8 false starts. The LSU game was good offensively, but it was kind of the defense that kind of put you in a bind and put you behind the 8 ball. And then AR came in behind. So we'll see what the coaching changes does, because and this is another thing I want to mention. I've heard this a lot talked about in radio. After the South Carolina game, I heard a lot of people say, "Well, if Dan Mullen is able to win the next 3, or if Dan Mullen can go 2-1, it depends on who he loses to. If he loses to Missouri, if he loses to Florida State, that can't be the reason why Dan Mullen and the staff stays or if he's fired. Your decision has to be made already after that South Carolina game if Dan Mullen stays or if he's let go. And I think Scott Strickland knows. I don't think anything that happens going before today, I don't think anything that happened in these last 3 games decided if Scott Strickland was going to keep or fire Dan Mullen. That's just my personal opinion. Scott Strickland doesn't seem like an emotional guy. He's very level-headed. Not being emotional means you always wonder about everything. You're not pulling the trigger just off of one thing. For example, Florida didn't play well against Georgia, and then they obviously didn't play well against South Carolina. I don't think Scott Strickland making a decision like that and fire him, let him go. So I think Scott Strickland. I don't think the last couple of games are going to decide if Dan Mullen is fired or if he's let go. I think Scott Strickland's already made that decision, and then that decision will come out the Sunday on Thanksgiving weekend after Florida plays Florida State, regardless of win or loss for Florida. As I see a couple of your guys' comments rolling in, as this is the Gators' final report. Florida comes out with a victory 70-52. Florida hasn't scored this many points since 2008 when Florida beat the Citadel. And I wonder how many times Florida's given up that many points. I didn't hear the stat. I was listening to Mick Hubert on the radio that Samford obviously scored 52. Florida scored 70. They haven't scored that many points since 2008. And that's crazy to think of if you think about all the talent that's came to the NFL. Again, I understand that, you've had Muschamp, you've had McElwain, but, to not reach that number was pretty surprising once you heard the stat that I did on the radio. Driver Lane drops a comment. I've been patient. Team fundamentals are a joke. That's coaching. Recruiting not up to par. That's coaching. Team is not playing hard. Again, coaching. Time to pull the plug. Yeah, I agree. And it's coaching. It's recruiting. It's the guys not playing for you. And players, former players have said this throughout the week that I've seen on Twitter. Even when Muschamp wasn't playing coaching well, and he had what was it, the 4-win season? I think it was 2013. I think it was 13 or 14. The guys played hard for him, and that defense always played hard for him. They never quit. That South Carolina performance never happened under Will Muschamp. The game you saw today where Florida is all out of sorts. The first drive where Samford's going tempo, they're at the 2-yard line, Samford is, and Florida's trying to have a defensive line change, and then Dan Mullen has to call a timeout on the first drive of the game. That's 100% on coaching. That's not the players. And, that's not that's all 100% coaching. And why I said if you guys are just joining us, that I don't think this coaching staff stays after the year. I think Scott Strickland will make a decision the Thanksgiving weekend. I don't know if Scott Strickland will pull the trigger. I thought that he would pull the trigger. I thought Dan Mullen would be fired after the Florida State game, after last week's game. And then as the week progressed and went through, I think my emotions changed a little bit of what I thought Scott Strickland would do. But there's no way you can keep anybody on this defensive staff. Offensively, there was there were how many recruits this week? I think it was 2 flipped away from Florida and then went to Georgia. And one of them said, quote, no one, I haven't kept a close relationship with anybody. And I think he mentioned Billy Gonzalez's name. Like that's part of the job, coach. When you're not in season the 3 months and when you're not in spring ball, you're on the road recruiting. I remember Nick Saban. I forget what national title it was, but Nick Saban was asked when he's on the podium with the team on the stage, holding the trophy that you just won the national title, and I forget who the reporter was. They asked Nick Saban, "What are you doing tomorrow, Coach?" And Nick Saban says, "Well, I'm recruiting," and that's the mindset you have to have. So Florida letting go of their offensive line coach John Hevesy, whoever that offensive line coach, and this was mentioned in Zach Goodall's article. He covers Florida for Sports Illustrated. That offensive line coach has to be an ace recruiter because you have to catch up so much from the line play, from the guys that don't have the talent, because it hasn't been up to par at all. Yeah, so I saw this stat. Florida gave up 42 points in the first half. That's never happened. And this is another thing. Samford, whatever it is, so they've played 10 games now. In the previous 9 games, they've only scored around 40 points 3 times, and they've never scored more than 50. And they did that against Florida's defense. Just inexcusable. And they had, Samford finished with 530 yards. They had 42, I think it was, in the first half. But give Florida's defense credit, Coach Robinson. They made adjustments somehow. I know there was a lot of busted plays. They kept that to a minimum and only gave up, 10 points in the second half. So at least that's a positive. There were a couple freshmen that played. I saw Austin Barber, offensive lineman, who was one of the top recruits from Florida last year. He got some playing time at the end. Emory Jones is apparently the guy for Florida. I don't see how Dan Mullen changes anything going forward because Anthony Richardson was cleared to play throughout the week after the knee injury he had Friday after the hotel dance. If you guys didn't see that, I think they said he hurt his knee, something with his legs. So I don't expect that to change. I don't expect Florida to win next week. I expect what we saw today and what Florida did against South Carolina, a team that comes out flat. 4:00 kick, so it's not noon. So they won't just be waking up. But I don't see how Florida beats Missouri and Florida State. Good Lord, I know a lot of fans have joked the last 10 years about the game being on Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network and how bad the two teams are. This is certainly up there with Florida will, if they lose next week, they'll be playing for a bowl. FSU is 3-6, so they need to win out. They need to beat Miami. FSU's up on Miami 17-0. care to watch that or care what the score is. So FSU has Boston College next week and then Florida. So if Florida State is able to hold on for a win today and then beat Boston College next week, both teams will be playing for a bowl pretty much. As as crazy as that sounds, I mean, I don't know. I think Florida just needs to get rid of their staff and at the end of the season and regroup because again, Florida has that brand new football only facility coming in the spring or early summer, one of the two. So you don't. And Terry Norvell mentioned this on the show last week, and it's archived if you guys want to see it on the Florida Gator and the SEC channel at the Voice of College Football. Make sure we're subscribing and seeing all of the other channels with Georgia, the SEC later today, and Mark Rogers always hosting a show on Saturday night. But you have the football only facility starting. It's going to be opened up. I think it's pretty much finished starting the beginning of next year. And you don't want to be part of a program where you kind of know that, if you're the administration, that you're going to let go of Dan Mullen if you're going to give him 1 year, because then it's just 1 year sets you back 3 years. And Terry mentioned this Owens College Sports today. You catch his Facebook show. If you know you're going to let go of a guy and you know that guy is not the guy, and I think Florida fans will mostly agree that Dan Mullen is not going to be the guy. Dan Mullen is not going to be a person that is going to take you consistently to the SEC and get you in playoff picture, get you in playoff berths. Why still have him? His buyout's $12 million. Figure out a way to deal with that. Whether if you want to pay him all up front or give him lump sum, do whatever. July 1st, give him $2 million every year for the next 6 years or whatever. Let the boosters and the administration deal with that. But this is the time where Florida has to keep the ball rolling, specifically with recruiting, because you get that football only facility, something that should have been done years ago, and Florida is just now up to par with Alabama and just now up to par with Georgia and all the good teams when it comes to facilities. And it all goes back to recruiting. I call high school football games in Jacksonville, and I was talking with a coach, and his son was he graduated in 2018 in high school, obviously pre-COVID, and he went through a lot of junior days with Georgia and Alabama and so on and so forth. And the coach was always a Florida fan growing up, and he said, seeing what Florida's facilities were like, and then seeing every other school, specifically in the SEC, it's a lot different. And, players, when they're 17, 18 years old, they care about what's cool. Having, all of the, he was mentioning like Alabama, every plastic cup had a national championship logo on it. When you're riding around Georgia on their shuttle bus, they have, it's like there's like a video, it's like an aerial, it's like a 360, Georgia, when they beat Oklahoma and they're going to play Alabama in the national title game, things like that. Florida's lag behind, and the coach was telling me, he would get fired up listening to the band and running out of the tunnel, and kids just don't care about that. Not as much as they did before. And, it's one of those things where you have to keep up with the Joneses because, well, if Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss, and everybody else is doing it, you kind of have to play and tag along with them, or else you're going to be left behind. I use the iPhone analogy. You can keep using iPhones and you keep using iPhone 3, but everybody else using the iPhone 12 and they're getting better internet and better service. You take your pick, what you want. Driver Lane drops a comment. Thank you guys for keep dropping these comments. As he said, Jeremy Foley said it best. What must be done eventually must be done immediately. Yeah, and that goes pretty much to what Terry was saying. I saw that, and I think it was a Nick Delatorre article that was written earlier this week. He's exactly right. I mean, why wait when you know he's not the guy? Why wait when you know that you're going to let him go eventually? Pay him whatever he needs, give him his buyout, $12 million, and let him walk so that you can start fresh, start the staff. Because also you have to consider this right now. Think about all the teams right now that are looking for a head coach. USC, LSU, and also TCU. TCU's not in that same caliber, but I'm just talking about Power 5 schools right now that are looking for coaches. And if you're the administration, you have to know right after that Florida State game if you're going to keep them or if you're going to let them go, or if you're going to keep the staff or let the staff go. Because, well, if you wait 2 weeks, number one, signing day is mid-December. So you have to obviously have to have coaches on staff to go out and recruit. And you got to get the best guy available. And my opinion, I think Florida's job is better than LSU. LSU, you're in the SEC West. You're playing in the toughest division. You're playing in the SEC. Florida's program isn't – Florida's program to me is not as broken as it is for LSU. LSU has a lot of issues off the field. Florida's issues are mostly on the field, and it goes to recruiting. And speaking of recruiting, I looked at it today. The 2022 class, if you look in-state, the top 50 guys, Florida has 4 of them. 4 of the top 50 guys in the state of Florida and 24/7's top 50, regardless of position, only 4 guys are committed to Florida. And that's why Clay Helton got let go of USC, one of the reasons. Yes, it had to do with his performance. Yes, it had to do with, the team losing and other factors. But he didn't recruit his own state. If you look at the state of California, Oklahoma's quarterback, I think they have one from California. I know Clemson does, DJU. Alabama, Bryce Young's from California. Ohio State's quarterback is from California. Look at who's the best schools in college football in the last 5 years. It's been Clemson. It's been Alabama. It's been Ohio State. So, I mean, and if you look at Florida, Emory Jones is from Georgia. Anthony Richardson's in Florida's backyard in Gainesville. But so many guys are leaving and jumping ship when that's you. That should be you. And on top of that, at a time right now when Florida State and Miami are so down, and you don't even have to worry about them in recruiting, or at least you shouldn't. And we're here now, and I mean, Miami has a better recruiting class right now than Florida. I think Miami last I saw was 11th in the 2022 class. As Tom drops a comment, embarrassing Gator win against Furman. Mullen has no fire or desire. The Gator football team is soft and has no quit on them. It has quit on them. We owe Mullen $12 million time for AD to pull the plug on Mullen. Yeah, it kind of goes back to what Driver Lane said. What must be done eventually must be done immediately. I don't know if Dan Mullen will be let go if you're just now joining us. If it were up to me, I would. And I heard a lot of people throughout the week speaking of, well, let's see how the last 3 games are. If it's 2-1, you lose to Florida State, you let him go. But if you're 3-0, you keep him. You can't go by that. I mean, we're talking about an FCS school, a Florida State team that's probably one of the worst teams it's had since 1976, and a Missouri team. Let me look at Missouri's schedule. I know they're not good, but Missouri's 4-5, and they lead South Carolina right now 14-7. So I don't agree with, let's see how Florida plays the last 3 games and make a decision off that, because I've heard that a lot in radio. I don't agree with that 100%. You knew Scott Strickland and the administration should have known after the South Carolina game if you want to keep Dan Mullen's staff or do you not. And that decision should be made after the Florida State game, in my opinion. So, and yeah, his players don't want to play for him, and that's something that hasn't happened since Jim McElwain. We saw that game, the Georgia game where he pretty much told the team that he was leaving, and then you saw that performance. But I mean, if you go back to guys like Will Muschamp, you can say what you want about his coaching, but those guys never quit on him whatsoever. Yes, they had a 4-win season, but those teams, what happened against South Carolina last week, that would have never happened under Will Muschamp. And the same thing with Urban Meyer until the very end when he lost the locker room. And I think Dan Mullen's lost the locker room. I don't think these guys, for whatever reason, care for Dan Mullen at this point. It's year 4, and things like this shouldn't be happening. When you're going to New Year's Six Bowls year after year in your first 3 years, and you're taking over a poor coaching staff that happened before you with Jim McElwain, and then now it's time for all those guys that have left, and now these are your guys. This is your recruiting class. These are guys that you brought in. That's an issue. And you have to ask yourself, if you're the AD for Florida, Scott Strickland, and the administration, is this the guy? If the answer is no, let him walk. If the answer is yes, okay, then we move. I don't think Dan Mullen's the guy. I don't see Dan Mullen competing with Georgia in the SEC East, competing for SEC titles with Alabama, because he said he's going to coach for another 10 years. So I'll take his word at that. And then can he get in the playoff? Well, you can't get in the playoff unless you're competing with Georgia and Alabama in the SEC. And it's like Jeremy Foley said, what must be done eventually must be done immediately. That's my 2 cents. Defensively, they gave up 42 points today. I know a lot of people say this is embarrassing win, even though Florida looked like they were going to lose. They were 35-point favorites coming into today. Obviously, they didn't get that spread, although they made it close at 18 from what the score was. Florida was down 1 point, 42-28. Emory Jones had his best game, went 28 for 34, as he almost broke the single-game passing record, as he finished with one moment. He finished with 460 yards through the air and 86 on the ground. So it's pretty clear Dan Mullen's guy is Emory Jones. Anthony Richardson was cleared to play throughout the week because he hurt his knee in the hotel room Friday before the South Carolina game. And he was cleared to play through the middle of the week, and I guess Dan Mullen just rolls with Emory Jones. As I'm looking to see what Dan Mullen said after the game. Kamori Gamble had a breakout game with over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. Dan Mullen said, "No one's going to be harder on me than me. I love to win. I'm a competitor. I love to win. There's nobody that is more disappointed, not just in wins and losses, but when we don't live up to the Gator standard than me." He can say that, but, actions speak louder than words. And, I said this to start the show. This is the Gators' final report at the Voice of College Football. We're on the Florida Gator and the SEC channel. Make sure we're subscribing to both channels, giving us a thumbs up, and make sure we're watching all of the other live shows and post-game shows throughout the day. Georgia has theirs after the Tennessee game. Oklahoma has theirs after they lost to Baylor. And obviously, always Mark Rogers has his post-game show, The Voice of College Football, every Saturday night. Dan Mullen says one thing, and what's on the field is a completely different thing. And I didn't see the game on TV a lot. I was running around, and I heard the game on radio. But in that first drive, you have a new interim coach, Coach Robinson. Then Dan Mullen let go of Todd Grantham Sunday. And I understand that the coaches, have a lot of emotion one way or the other, because when you're around guys, regardless of what fans think, when you're around guys every day, those guys are pretty much like family. And, I think some of the guys, someone said on radio during the Gator game that, it felt like a divorce that, you're with them every day and then he's gone. But Samford was going tempo, and Florida's D-line is trying to switch out when Samford's about to run a play. That's just that was an excuse one, and it didn't look good. Specifically, when Florida's coming off their worst performance in a long time against South Carolina. You would think that after Florida lost to South Carolina the way they did, that this week of practice would be crisp, that, the coaches would be on the players, etc., things along those lines. And It didn't certainly look like that to start. Now Florida's defense adjusted in the second half, only giving up 10 points as Samford had 42. Um, Luckily, the offense scored 70, the most points they've scored since '08 when Florida played the Citadel. But it just doesn't feel like the players want to play for Dan Mullen. And then obviously the crowd today, it was announced. I don't know if you guys saw 70,000. It looked like the beginning of the game there were dozens at the game. As no surprise that students didn't go to the game. As I mean, you can't. That's pretty much what I expected from the student section. But yeah, Florida's on top, 70-52 over Samford, rather. Not Stanford. Samford out of Alabama. Florida needs one more win to be bowl eligible. If that matters to anybody, if you want to get the extra 15 practices and and make your way to the toilet bowl and play on pretty much right for signing day. So any last questions or comments before I sign off at the Gators final report? You guys can follow me on Twitter right there at Dylan_Denmark as we do this after every post-game show. Next week, Florida plays Missouri. Missouri trails South Carolina right now 14-7. Missouri and Florida are pretty much in the same boat, trying to get 6 wins and get a bowl game. But not a pretty performance again, but a win is a win. So Florida pretty much paid Samford $500,000 to play in a close game and in a game that was really ugly for most of the time, but defense adjusted after they gave up 42 points, most points that Florida ever gave up in the first half, and most points that Florida has scored since 2008. I think that'll wrap it up for me. Signing off, I'm going to catch some balls. It's almost 5 o'clock. If you guys missed any of the show previously, it's always archived at the Voice of College Football's YouTube channels, at the Florida Gator and the SEC channel. Just make sure we're subscribing and liking all the videos and post-game shows throughout the day with Oklahoma, Georgia, and so on and so forth. For me, Dylan Denmark, signing off. You guys have a good weekend.